actually had this thought too. When God says, let us make man in our image, the us that he's referring to is what's called the divine council. A lot of people in the comments were like, oh, he's talking about the Holy Trinity. No, he's not. The Holy Trinity wasn't fully agreed upon when this story was written. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the Holy Trinity wasn't fully established until the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, where they also established the divinity of Jesus, but that's another video. So the divine council was a council of deities that God would consult with in the Old Testament, one example being in Genesis 1 through 3. Another example is in 1 Kings 22, where God consults with the council to decide on if he's going to send an evil spirit to trick a king into going into battle and dying there. But bringing it back to Genesis, I noticed something while looking at the two creation stories in Genesis 1 and in Genesis 2. All throughout chapter 1, the word God is used, but in chapter 2, they use Lord God instead. So if we're going with the theory that it's two different creation stories in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, it's not that hard to also infer that it's two different gods creating two different batches of humans. It kind of makes sense when you think about it, because the God in chapter 1 is happy with his creation and he tells them to like go on, be fruitful and multiply. And the God in chapter 2 kind of has his creation isolated off in the garden by themselves, and the only rule that he gives his creation is to not eat from the tree of knowledge. And when they do, they are sent out of the garden to go live on earth with the people who were created in Genesis 1. And in chapter 2, they don't start multiplying until after they're kicked out of the Garden of Eden. But in chapter 1, God tells them to be fruitful and multiply immediately. I don't know. I think you might be onto something.